Basically, what happens is the Nautilus defeats the Viridian, or gets the Viridian to a point where it's worth it to retreat. Osiris retreats, vowing vengeance on the Discovery and Starfleet. Congratulations, Saru. You got yourself in a war. It's exactly what Vance didn't want you to do. You got yourself in a war. Saru was doing good for the first 4 or 5 episodes of this goddamn show. Before I got into the review of this episode proper, I'd like to go over some theories that I had just based on what we've seen so far in the series. The main one is that the reason Giorgio is getting sick is because their universes are drifting apart somehow. Remember, she's from the mirror universe, and somehow the internal logic of Discovery at this point is that the universes diverge as time goes on. I don't know if it's on a physical level or just with regards to the events that take place, but regardless, Giorgio is disintegrating and pulling back to the other universe inadvertently because the universes are drifting apart. This is why she's sick. Another possible theory I have is that perhaps the reason Detmer was getting sick originally, the person with the prosthetic eye, she wasn't getting PTSD. She was getting the same sickness Giorgio had because she's also from the mirror universe. What? And at the end of the series, her and Giorgio will leave to go back to the mirror universe to start the Section 31 show. They'll go back to the mirror universe. And then what'll happen, though, is that when they go back, they slingshot back to the time in the mirror universe that took place in Season 1. And then they'll go to the Prime universe the same way Lorca came through originally. And then that's how they'll get into the Section 31 show, which takes place in the same timeline as Season 1 and 2 of Discovery. Call me crazy, but I think that's going to be some kind of a plot twist. What else do we got? Tilly, at some point, will be replaced by a permanent first officer who will be from the 32nd century Starfleet. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It'd be interesting to have a character who's from that time. If we don't end up finding out that the current Starfleet is evil, ooh, God, I hope they don't do that. That would be so obvious. The second I saw Vance, I was thinking, oh my God, please don't be evil. Please don't be evil. And I'm sad to say, after this episode, it appears they're dropping lots of hints that the current Starfleet / Federation is evil in some way. And I hope that's not the case. It's so obvious. How many times are we going to have a plot about evil admirals in Starfleet and evil Starfleet? How many more times? I just don't want to see it anymore. I mean, we can't come up with any good villains anymore. The villains are always just someone from the Federation or something that the Federation created. It'd be interesting to see a truly alien villain, similar to the Borg, before they got ruined. I'm actually one of those people that thinks the Borg got ruined the second time we see them, basically. Like, I didn't want to humanize the Borg in any way. I thought they were scarier when they were a completely unknowable alien force, like they were in the original introduction of the Borg. But something like that again would be cool. But currently our villain is Osira, who is a Orion female who I guess is some type of crime lord. Could be worse. Could be a lot better, though. I'm calling it now. Starfleet is secretly evil, though. God, I hope I'm wrong. So with that out of the way, let's check out my review of this episode, Sanctuary, Season 3, Discovery, Episode 8. So this episode picks up on a plot point that I thought was interesting earlier, but now I think is stupid, because Giorgio is ruining it. A few episodes ago, Giorgio was getting sick and having manic episodes or something as a result of being detached from her universe, I think. And this looked interesting because we saw Giorgio in a moment of weakness, and she was fainting, and she was losing track of her thoughts. But now in this episode, she's cracking wise and being mean to everybody and generally just being a horrible, nightmarish person who belongs in the brig and should die. And I'm just getting tired of it. The shtick is wearing thin, I guess you could say. I thought this episode should have had a calmer Georgiou to reflect on what she's going through now. Not that I care, because she's a murderer and doesn't belong on any Starfleet vessel. She belongs on SETI Alpha 5. But, yeah. Aurora Pente. Yeah, let's go with that one. Yeah, I have no idea why we're carrying water for this character. I have no idea. Georgiou is sitting around bad-mouthing everybody. We all know she's a killer. She's an empress from an evil empire, from a mirror universe. And characters are saying to her, "Don't worry, we'll get through this. We're here for you." Blah, blah, blah. Why? Why? It's wearing thin. Okay, it was slightly interesting last time. Now it's ruined. Just like Saru. But I'll get into that. So, somehow, Book, even though subspace communication is down, Book receives a message from his brother that he thinks the message is recent enough that he can respond now, and he'll still be alive, even though we don't have subspace communication. I don't know how he got this message. It's not elaborated on. This episode is filled with so much faulty logic and faulty science. It's unbelievable. This episode demands that you do not think about any sentence that's coming out of the characters' mouths. You just take it on faith of the heart that the next line coming out of their mouth, following the previous one, will advance the plot without making sense, but don't think about it. Just go with it. So, Book gets a message from his brother that he's run afoul somehow of the Emerald Chain, and holy crap, we have to go look after Book's brother. You know, this guy who's not in the Federation, he's not in Starfleet. Nobody really knows him, but they bring it up with Vance, and they ask Admiral Vance, okay, if they can spore jump the Discovery on a whim to look after the personal affairs of Book's brother. Okay? Like, do you think Admiral Vance would even let that slip for 1 second to do something that stupid? Of course not. They would never do that. But then Saru says, "Oh, what if we just go as impartial observers?" And Vance is like, "Whoa, okay. Good idea. Okay, I didn't think of that." And somehow it's okay. Somehow it's okay for them to spore jump to a Kwijan, I think the planet's called, where Book is from, and where Book's brother is. They go there, and it's evident that like ocean or sea locusts have moved from the ocean onto the land and are eating the crops of the people on that planet, Book's people. And Book's people are empaths, right? They can like talk to animals, and they've tried asking them to leave, but they won't leave. And basically we find out that Osira promised the people on that planet a natural repellent for these locusts, and she was using this to force them into doing a bunch of shit that they didn't want to do. One of them was selling them transworms in exchange for this repellent that I don't think they actually got, but really they just put themselves willingly under the boot of Osira. So Osira is controlling this planet now by lording over them this natural repellent that they don't get, and I think Osira is also threatening the planet with deadly force, which comes to pass later. They get there, Michael and Book beam down, and wouldn't you know it, they get captured by Book's brother and his henchmen. And we find out Book's brother, Kahim, is collaborating with the Emerald Chain in exchange for the safety of probably his family and the planet itself. And of course, Book and Kahim don't see eye to eye on that, as you can imagine. You can imagine why, because Book wants to save transworms and Kahim is selling transworms, which begs the question, in the 32nd century, how are transworms such a good source of meat that getting them is worth going so far out of your way as to take a planet hostage to get them, when I assume that other planets are full of meat. What is it about a transworm? I wish to go into this. And for those who don't remember, the transworm is the big animal that they save in episode 1 of this season. You know, the one that eats the Orion guys. And it's all very funny, and I think Michael gets swallowed by it, and then the transworm spits her up because she's too disgusting. But yeah, why can't they just replicate meat or food, or find some other source, or grow it, or farm them? Why can't we just farm them? Why do we gotta steal them? Why do we gotta poach them? And why are we selling transworms, okay, to pay for repellent for locusts? So we're selling huge transworms in exchange for repellent for bugs. And the best scientists on this planet can't come up with another way to get rid of these bugs. I assume that they left because of a food source problem, right? That's why animals leave. Why couldn't they just give them a different source of food? Like, replicate a different source of food, put it back in the ocean, so they go back, and then you don't need Osiris anymore. But no, we have to come up with a natural repellent in exchange for bigger animals, you know, that you'd probably want to save. There's probably only a few transworms, but I bet you there's trillions of locusts. But oh well, I guess don't put too much logic into it. No logic here. So meanwhile, back on the Discovery, they're looking at these signals, and they're like using these to calculate the origin of the burn. And they're doing this in engineering. And they figure out that the burn is coming from this one nebula. And Saru uses his magic hearing to look at it and go, enhance, enhance, flip 90 degrees, enhance again. And they're going, enhance, 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 enhance. And oh my god, what? There's a Federation distress signal coming from the inside of this nebula. I immediately thought that the Federation ship inside that nebula, at the source of the burn, I immediately thought that the reason why Starfleet didn't reveal that fact was because they didn't want anyone to know, because that nebula, inside that nebula, they were testing some new piece of technology that was dangerous, and they knew that they caused the burn but were hiding it. And I would guess that in the future episodes, Starfleet is actually going to be working against Discovery to make sure they don't find that ship that's in there. And it would be really funny if it was the Enterprise, but at the same time I kind of hope not, because it's kind of pathetic, isn't it, that Starfleet brought this on themselves and they need somebody from the past to come save them. Isn't that just grand? Isn't that hopeful and wonderful? Isn't the future nice? Oh my god, what's going on? Like, and even if that's the case, isn't it unbelievable that anyone else, the people of Navarre, Vulcans and Romulans, couldn't figure this out? That the signal was coming from that nebula? They couldn't figure it out. Like, and that's, I'm just picking a name of, like, Navarre, Vulcans and Romulans off the top of my head. There are so many more races that could figure this out. Okay, that are advanced enough to figure this out. We don't need Dingus from the 2200s to come here and tell us how to figure out where the burn started. It's stupid. It's inane. It's just hard to conceive of. But we'll see what happens. So on the surface of the planet, Quijan, the altercation between Book and Kahim is coming to a head, and in orbit, Discovery has been intercepted by a ship called the Viridian, which is Osiris' ship, and it looks like something straight out of Star Wars, baby. It's got the gun turrets and everything, and let's Star Wars it up. And Osira wants Rin, if you remember from last episode. This is the Andorian prisoner that they took from the salvage camp run by Osira previously. So Osira wants Rin beamed over to her ship, and they're willing to get into a fight with Discovery over it. And meanwhile, Saru took the Discovery to that planet, and he had the express purpose of being an observer only, and not getting involved with anything, and not getting into a war. So what do? They tell Detmer to take a fall for the team and pretend to go rogue, steal the Nautilus, which is still in the shuttle bay of Discovery, fly it over to the Viridian, and start shooting the Viridian. Okay? And Osira doesn't... They think Osira won't blame Discovery and Starfleet for this because she's stupid or something. Like, come on. And they even go to their way to say that Detmer will be severely reprimanded for this action, right? Wink, wink. But it's their plan, and Vance is going to see it, hopefully, and he's going to be like, do you think I'm stupid? Clearly, this is Saru's fault. Clearly, this is the fault of the Discovery. How many more times is somebody on Discovery going to go rogue? He's saying to himself. As soon as they go back, next episode, I hope Vance gets rid of everybody on the Discovery, takes Discovery apart piece by piece, reverse engineers the spore drive, puts it in other ships, and immediately busts everyone on the Discovery crew down 2 ranks. That's the only thing that makes sense here. But that's probably not what's going to happen, because that makes sense. But I know it sounds like I hate this episode, but I actually didn't. So the Nautilus is zipping around the Viridian, and it's right out of Star Wars. If you turn this episode on at that point, you'd think you were watching Star Wars, because we're zipping around and we're pew-pew-pewing, and Detmer is flying in the ship with Rin. And I don't really remember why Rin's there, other than the fact that Rin knows the layout of Osira's ship for some reason. But they couldn't talk. Rin had to go on the ship and couldn't communicate with her over secure radio. Maybe the Viridian would hear it and know that they're working together with the Discovery, even though it's obvious that the Nautilus came out of the shuttle bay of Discovery, and you'd have to be stupid to think they're not working together. This would make a lot more sense if you've seen it, because what I'm saying sounds like it doesn't make sense, because it doesn't. But if you see it, at least you'll know what I'm talking about. And to be fair, I can barely follow it. I'm having a hard time following even the dialogue in these shows. It's so fast. It's like they know it doesn't make sense, but if they say it fast enough, you won't think about it. So I'm there with my old, slow brain trying to figure this stuff out, and I can figure out engineering of this starship, and I can't figure out these plots. Yeah, so back on the planet, Book and Kahim are down there, and Michael. And Book looks up, and he sees the Viridian from the surface. And in the space battle scene, they are not in low orbit. Okay? They're not in low orbit. It's daytime. They look like they're in high orbit. Have the people who made this show ever seen anything in space before? Do the people who make this show, are they space aficionados in any way? Do they watch rockets? Do they look at what's going on in space right now? You can see it for free on the internet. Do they look at this? Do you know what it looks like when you look out the window on the space station? You know, on Earth in 2020? I can see that in the archival footage we have here. It doesn't look like this. When you're in low orbit, you're basically touching the sky. And they're in high orbit in this battle in this episode, and somehow Book can look up and see them. The Viridian should be a tiny speck, unless it's unbelievably huge, which I don't think it is. I think it's big. It's very big, but it's not unbelievable. And he even looks up and says, "Is that my ship?" To the completely invisible speck that he cannot see shooting at the Viridian in orbit, in high orbit in daytime. He thinks You can see his ship up there. He must be one hell of an empath if he can sense the presence of Detmer, Rin, and Grudge, perhaps, in the Nautilus. But I don't think he's that good. And, meanwhile, Osira is threatening the planet with photon torpedoes, which have no yield now, because we've seen a photon torpedo land in this episode, and it looks like it just went off like dynamite. And, they're threatening to burn down forests on this planet, and she threatens, like, the measurement is in acres for photon torpedoes. She's threatening to burn down acres of forest with photon torpedoes. Okay, that's like if I threatened a sawbug on the ground with a magnum. Like, it's a mismatch. Like, she should have said she was going to physically devastate continents with photon torpedoes. Would have been a little bit more sensible, because we're dealing with antimatter here. Most ships are disabled with 1 or 2 torpedoes, okay? Starships that are designed to take a hell of a beating, okay? So basically what happens is the Nautilus defeats the Viridian, or gets the Viridian to a point where it's worth it to retreat. Osira retreats, vowing vengeance on the Discovery and Starfleet. Congratulations, Saru. You got yourself in a war. It's exactly what Vance didn't want you to do. You got yourself in a war. Saru was doing good for the first 4 or 5 episodes of this goddamn show. He was doing fantastic. I was liking him. These last few episodes, he reprimanded Michael by making her chief science officer. That's it. He made Tilly first officer. Doesn't make any sense. And he willingly got Starfleet into a war when it's the weakest it's ever been. I used to like Saru a lot. He was my favorite character. Now I don't know. So they get back to the Discovery, and everything's all better again. And Georgiou's medical treatment, her medical episode, was inconclusive because she ran off in the middle of the test, and I think she stole her medical data on some type of little chip, and she has that with her now. And apparently she was having an increased heart rate. I don't know what that means. Maybe next episode we'll find out. But Kahim and Book and Michael beam back up to Discovery. Qui-Jan is safe. They've defeated Osira for the time being. And Discovery somehow uses its ventral sensor dome on the saucer section to enhance the empathic powers of Book and Kahim, and they tell the Locusts to leave. And I mean, I assume they just come right back, right? I would assume they were going to come right back for food, because I mean, why did they come in the first place? But whatever, that's never brought up again. And somehow the systems of Discovery can interact with empathic power. Not sure how this works, but I think they could have explained it a little better. A few extra lines. They probably could have said they put down some type of pattern enhancer around Kahim and Book that would do yada yada yada, but they don't bother explaining it, and they fix it in 1 second at the end, kind of like fixing things with the deflector was in TNG and Voyager. Just come up with something and make the deflector do it. The magic do anything deflector. Our deflector on the Dingwall can't really do anything. It's basically just a rudimentary particle sweeper that helps us at warp and at pre-warp speeds. That's really it. You can't shoot anything out of it. I guess it might hurt you a little bit if you got really close to it when it was at full tilt. But that's it. So, yeah, it's kind of depressing. And Kahim brings his little son on board, and they're walking, and they have a very Star Trek ending where everyone's happy. Book says he wants in, either with the Federation or with Starfleet, which I had predicted. I'm pretty sure Book will have a uniform next episode, or at least a provisional one. He's probably going to be a crewman, but knowing this show, he'll be captain in a week. And everyone lived happily ever after until they all get destroyed by Osira because of Saru, and because of the extreme insubordination of the crew. The ending was heartwarming, but the show made no sense. So, if I review this based on pure logic alone, it's probably getting a 3. But that's not really what I gave it, because I don't review these on logic or plot anymore. I've given up doing that, and I go based on whether or not I want to kill myself after the episode's over. And I didn't want to kill myself in this episode because this episode didn't really have any Michael Burnham congratulations. Michael Burnham didn't really save the day in this episode, so it was a breath of fresh air. I came out of it thinking, wow, I might actually want to watch the next episode, which is good. So, with the main plot out of the way, let's check out some of the things that I noticed in my creepy notebook. In this episode, Adira revealed to the crew that she wants to be called they or them. And I guess this makes sense, being that she is a Trill symbiont. And it kind of makes me wonder why we never did this before. Like in Deep Space Nine, it's surprising that Jadzia didn't want to be called they or them. Because really, as a Trill, you are many different people in one body. It's pretty interesting. But what's not as cool is that Adira mentions that Gray, the previous host of her symbiont, doesn't talk to her anymore. So she's not hitting it off with Gray right now. And I wonder if this has something to do with the burn, because earlier in the episode it's revealed that the signal also includes the signal coming from the source of the burn. Also includes that piece of music that Gray would play on that instrument. And I wonder if Gray is not talking to Adira because Gray was involved with the burn in some way, and that's why he knows that music. And he doesn't want her to find out the secret of the burn. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading a bit too much into it and it's something simple. But, yeah. Adira, Culber, and Stamets seem to be hitting it off. Adira is kind of like the child that Culber and Stamets never had. And it's even brought up earlier in this episode when Georgiou says that she would kill Culber's kids or something. And Culber said, I never had time to have kids, I think. So it's already kind of mentioned. And they're already kind of forming their own family. Because they all seem to get along. And it was cute. And I liked it. But, I wanted to see, Jet Reno. How come Jet isn't in every episode? I like Jet Reno. She plays well off of Stamets. They're a natural comedic team together. Jet, Stamets, and Tilly. And they weren't together in this episode, and I thought that was kind of sad. How come we do these episodes where some characters are just gone? Like, no Jet in this episode. So that kind of sucked. At one point in this episode, I swear to God, I saw Saru press a button to open a door, which I've never seen before in Star Trek, so it makes me wonder if the engineering room and the spore drive room in the Discovery requires special clearance, and you need to have a fingerprint scan or something. I don't know, but it's just something I noticed. At one point in this episode, Rin reveals that the reason Osira wants him killed or detained in some way is because Rin knows the secret of the Emerald Chain, which is that the Emerald Chain is running out of dilithium. Surprise! That's the big secret. The Emerald Chain is running out of dilithium, and somehow the only person who knows this is Rin. How good is the security for the Emerald Chain if absolutely nobody in it knows that they're running out of dilithium? The only person who knows is Osira. There's got to be at least a few people that know, because they have to be sourcing it from somewhere, and Osira has to be explaining her strategies to somebody. It can't be Rin. Is the only person who doesn't know, or only person who does know, and that's why they want him killed. I'd rather put out some kind of disinformation campaign saying that Rin's lying or something, or that we're not running out of dilithium. You know, I would have my best spin team on that one. Anyway, it's just something that was kind of stupid. I was expecting something cool, like Rin knew some secret about how the Emerald Chain worked, where he knew some passcode for something that couldn't be changed, or he knew the location of their secret base or something. I thought it was going to be something cool like that, but no, it was just the fact that they're running out of dilithium. As is everybody else. So, big whoop. So, in conclusion, Star Warsy action can't hide the heartwarming tone of this episode. The sci-fi concepts and ideas that are taking precedent here, and they're kind of cool, which is uncommon for this show. Character motivations were clear and simple, and the Michael Burnham congratulation was not present or barely noticeable. On the negative side, Discovery still seems to be running afoul of the Federation. Why? This is the biggest mark against this episode. The fact that the Discovery is still going rogue and disregarding Admiral Vance. How many more times can Admiral Vance take this? How many strikes is too many? Questionable physics aside, this episode was kind of solid, and the ending tone felt very Star Trek to me, and filled me with hope, which is rare in this show, and for this reason, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. So, this is my second favorite episode of Star Trek Discovery. My first one being the one where they find Starfleet again, just because I'm a sucker for spaceships and Starfleet itself. I just think it's cool. Look, I'm in it. Yeah. So we're going 6 this time. Far from the worst. A little bit better than the middle. Just average. Drop some lines here. Add some explanatory lines there. This could have been a 7. With a little bit of extra work on the script, this could have been 7. But we're going 6. This could have been the best episode, but too many mistakes. On the plus side, not a lot of Michael Burnham congratulation. So, let's try to keep up that trend. And this is Lieutenant Mark, signing out. I gotta get back to my business. My shift's about to end here. And then I gotta do my second shift after this in engineering. So, I'll be seeing you.